There's this extraordinary quote from Bertolt Brecht where he says, "In the dark times, will there also be singing?" And he responds, yes, there will also be singing about the dark times. And I think that's testament to the fact that so much incredible art is born in times of chaos. And in times of darkness, often the thing that people turn to is self-expression through art and through literature. And that's what I wanted to talk about specifically today, literature that has been created in a time of crisis for Palestinian people. This is all going to be fiction, and I think that often people suggest that like non-fiction is facts, whereas fiction is fantasy. And I don't think that's always true. There's this great quote from Elena Ferrante in this book, In the Margins, where she says, "The genuine real life is an obsession, a torment for the writer. With greater or less ability, we fabricate fictions, not so the false will seem true, but to tell the most unspeakable truth with absolute faithfulness through fiction." Sometimes what we write in fiction can be the most truthful thing of all. And so, with that, I wanted to talk about Palestinian literature that I have been reading and will be reading in the future, because I think it's really, really important that all of us are educating ourselves right now, listening to Palestinian voices, listening to the people who are being affected by oppression. And so I'm going to start off with two books that I recommend as a starting point if you are looking to read more Palestinian literature. The incredible thing is that I actually posted these two books on my TikTok account, and I was talking about how much I love these two Palestinian books, and then loads of people commented with their Palestinian book recommendations, and so I did a big fat book haul, a big book order, and I'm going to show you which books I bought that I'm going to be reading based on your recommendations. So that's what I love about this community, is that it feels very symbiotic. Like, I share recommendations with you, but you also share recommendations with me, and we all kind of grow together in this lovely little book club. So without further ado, these are my recommendations that I will exchange for your recommendations. I have poetry and prose. I'll start with the prose. This is Minor Detail by Adania Shibli. Minor Detail was translated by Elizabeth Jacquet. A New Directions book. This is the story of the Nakba of 1949, where 700,000 people were displaced from their homes. Now, this book is divided into two halves, and in the first half, a group of Israeli soldiers attack this area. They kill everyone except one teenage girl. They capture this girl and they abuse and assault her in absolutely horrible, graphic ways. That is outlined in this book, so I will say trigger warning if that does affect you. If this would not be good for you to read, then don't read it. And we see this through the lens of the perpetrator, which makes it even more horrifying, I think. And then the second half of the novel is about a woman who is in Palestine, and she leaves through the border to go and investigate these horrific events that happened. So the second half is set more towards the present day, but it is completely haunted by the past. And there's almost this like translucent nature to the two stories where they sort of overlay one another in the novel. It's unashamedly political. It seeks to give a voice to the voiceless and center victims. And it's also about how parts of history are often fragmented and concealed and obscured by the perpetrators of these crimes, because they are trying to sweep what they did under the rug. They hide the evidence of what they did. And so for us as the reader, it's interesting because we know what happened. We've seen it play out in the first half of the book, and then this character in the second half of the book is kind of sleuthing around, investigating, trying to find answers. And that's what I mean when I say it has this kind of translucent quality, because we know, as the reader, we know what the character does not, or what she is trying to find out. We already know that information. So it's a very, very interesting style of book, and I think it's a really great and moving and powerful introduction to Palestinian literature. The next book I want to recommend is one of my all-time favorite poets. I absolutely love Mahmoud Darwish. The way that he writes about love and loss and exile is just exquisite. A lot of these poems really stuck with me. There are multiple poems in here that I took pictures of and sent to friends, emailed to people that I know, being like, you have to read this. And I want to read you the quote that's on the back, which is actually from Darwish's acceptance speech for the 2004 Prince Claus Fund Award, which I think is just stunning. And you just have to hear this. "A person can only be born in one place. However, he may die several times elsewhere, in the exiles and prisons, and in a homeland transformed by the occupation and oppression into a nightmare. Poetry is perhaps what teaches us to nurture the charming illusion, how to be reborn out of ourselves over and over again, and use words to construct a better world, a fictitious world, that enables us to sign a pact for a permanent and comprehensive peace with life. Mahmoud Darwish is one of the most kind of critically acclaimed and celebrated poets of the Arab world, and this was written from his perspective during a very tumultuous time in 2006. In 2006, Israel attacked both Gaza and Lebanon, and this collection, A River Dies of Thirst, is Darwish documenting his reaction and his perspective at the time. These poems and diary entries speak of both hope and joy, but also despair and pain and suffering. It feels incredibly bittersweet to read these poems, but his voice and his style just absolutely shine through, and I recommend Darwish's poetry to absolutely anyone. So these are my 2 recommendations, and now these are the books that people recommended to me in my TikTok comment section. I always feel like I have to fight to prove that the internet can be good, like social media can be brilliant, and this to me was an example of that, of like loads of people coming together to share wisdom, to share knowledge, to pool our collective understanding of where to begin with Palestinian literature, and so I'm so grateful to these recommendations in the comment section, so thank you. And this community will always be so special to me. Thank you to everyone who's a part of it. Anyways, I wanted to talk about these books. So the first one that I picked up is Against the Loveless World. This is by Susan Abulawa, and it was the winner of the Palestine Book Award. Alice Walker of The Colour Purple fame says that this author possesses the heart of a warrior. And it's really interesting because it's basically about a main character who is in an Israeli prison, and she is telling her fellow prisoners the story of her life. Many in the world outside call her a terrorist, and just as many people call her a revolutionary, a hero. But the truth is a little bit more complicated. When she was young, her and her mother fled from Palestine, and then as she grew up into a woman, she decided to return to her homeland. Once there, she finds books, friends, politics, and a purpose, but she is arrested and taken as a political prisoner. In this book, she sits in her cell and tells her story, and is described as a riot act against oppression, misogyny, and shame. This unyielding novel, an eye-opening insight into the life of the victimized, and I think that sounds gripping. I feel like this is going to be one of those books that is heartbreaking but also empowering, and so that is Against the Loveless World, and I also think that title is exquisite. So there's that. Then I have 3 books by the same author, because so many people recommended Kanafani's books. So he kind of wrote a lot of novellas and short stories, and so that's kind of what I have in this collection. So this is Men in the Sun and Other Palestinian Stories, and there's actually not really that much of a description on this one, so I'm kind of going in a little bit blind, aside from knowing that you guys recommended it. In the unsparing clarity of his writing, Kanafani offers the reader a gritty look at the agonized world of Palestine and the adjoining Middle East. So that's Men in the Sun, and then I also have All That's Left to You, which is this one here, a novella and short stories, and this was translated by May Jayasi and Jeremy Reed. Sorry, I should say this was translated from the Arabic by Hilary Kilpatrick. But back to All That's Left to You. All That's Left to You presents the vivid story of 24 hours in the real and remembered lives of a brother and sister living in Gaza and separated from their family. The desert and time emerge as characters as Kanafani speaks through the desert, the brother and the sister, to build the powerful rhythm of the narrative. The collection of stories provides evidence to the English reading public of Kanafani's position within modern Arabic literature. So I feel like this is an author I need to read, and I'm very excited to have not 1, not 2, but 3 of his books, because you guys also recommended Returning to Haifa, adapted here by Ismail Khalidi and Naomi Wallace. So this is a compelling story of 2 families, one Palestinian and one Israeli, forced by history into an intimacy that they didn't choose. In 1948, a Palestinian couple fled their home during the Nakba. Now, in the aftermath of the 1967 Six-Day War, the borders are open for the first time in 20 years, and they dare to return to their home. They are ready to find someone living where they once did, but nothing can prepare them for the encounter they both desire and dread with the son that they had to leave behind. Oh, wow, okay. So I think that is going to be really interesting. And then the final book that I have is this one, Mornings in Jenin. This is also by Susan Abulawa. So I have 2 books from her as well. Palestine, 1948. A mother clutches her 6-month-old son as Israeli soldiers march through her village. In a split second, her son is snatched from her arms and the fate of her family is changed forever. Forced into a refugee camp in Jenin and exiled from her ancient village, the family struggles to rebuild their world. So yeah, I think these stories are going to be really tough to read because they are about so much suffering, but also very, very important. And I think the beauty of reading fiction is that you really get to know the everyday reality of people living in countries and cultures that are unlike your own. So you get to see what a full day looks like, a full week looks like, a full month looks like, actually living and breathing in those spaces. Whereas like, obviously, a non-fiction book takes a bit more of an overall view of the situation. A non-fiction book is more breadth, whereas I feel like these books are more depth, because we get this microscopic, granular study of one person or one family, and as a result we get to slow down a little bit and think about what they would be wearing, what their house looks like, what foods they're cooking, how they move about the space, and you just can't capture those things as easily in a non-fiction book. Of course, I think that it's important to read a little bit of both, a little bit of everything, but I think that's the merit of reading fiction, is that we really get to walk a mile in one character's shoes, and you end up picking up a lot of information just about culture in general. So these are the books that I'm going to be reading, as well as some books that I've already read and that I recommend to you guys. So thank you so much for watching this video. I hope that this helped, and let's keep campaigning for peace and for a ceasefire as much as we possibly can. Write to your local MPs or your local government representatives. I'm sending so much love to all of you who are watching. So thank you for watching this video, and I'll see you very soon. Bye bye!